Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. Today I've got Empires of the Void 2, which is the follow-up to Ryan Locket's first game, a space exploration game, 4X, exploration, expansion, exploitation, and the fourth one, extermination. Extermination, that's the fourth one. Ryan Lockett is probably best known for Above and Below, and also for Near and Far, but you might know him for 8 Minute Empire, or you might know him for City of Ancients, City of Iron, Artifact Hunters. These are all games by Red Raven Games, and Empires of the Void is the, as far as I'm aware, sort of the biggest and meatiest game produced by the company. And now what I'm going to do is, because it is a hefty box, this is the deluxe edition from Kickstarter, but it doesn't have any significant differences to the retail version that you can purchase in stores. So I will run you through just exactly how you are going to explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate in space. So I've already been through my box and punched it out and bagged everything up in convenient baggies, player baggies and stuff like that, because that's just the kind of guy I am. But the first thing you'll notice is that there is a big space board with big empty holes. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill these holes full of random planets. Everybody's going to take on an alien race. There are 5 alien races in the box that you can play as. We will explore across this land, which is full of alien planets, most of which are inhabited, some of which are uninhabited. And they've all got different manner of aliens living on them. None of them are our home worlds. We've actually come in world ships, which are plastic miniatures that fly around space and act as sort of mobile home bases for your race. Here's my meticulously ordered Oracles of Zune baggie. The Oracles of Zune are purple, and they're these guys here, and this is their world ship. And it's going to fly around in space, conquering, exploiting, exterminating, and most importantly, earning us valuable victory points. So we'll be playing as these alien races that come from far off lands. The origin or the reason we've left undisclosed. You can be the nomads of Earth, who have left Earth for some reason, perhaps because it's not looking so healthy in the future. So this is the player board for the nomads of Earth. And they've got all these different tracks here that have buildings, different buildings you can build on them, but we'll get into all the rules and stuff and how that works later. But so far, all I can tell in terms of the difference between the alien races, other than aesthetics, are a handful of these technologies here and some of the world ship slots here. You can build buildings in here which represent improvements to your actual world ship. The price of doing that varies, and the space up here varies just ever so subtly between certain races. So these are the nomads of Earth. You've got here the Oracles of Zune, but what we've got here is their abilities, their technologies slightly different. Here we've got the Legions of Decima. They're a bit more warlike. Their technologies lead them into making war. They can also build buildings on their warship, just ever so slightly cheaper than anyone else. And the Parasites of Screech, who have this sort of little parasite mechanic that they can use, and they've also got 4 spaces up here on their world ship, including a cheaper slot as well. So they've got 1 extra cheaper slot than everybody else. And the Academy of Eeg, and they're good at sciencing and doing sciencey stuff, which makes sense because they're interstellar academics. So I've got some player reference cards here. I've got these cards here. This big deck is called the Power Deck, and a little deck called the Empire cards. I've got a bunch of planets. These planets are going to be laid out on the board to determine what's going on. One of the planets, Volca 7, is used specifically in a scenario that's described in the rulebook. The scenario is designed with, this planet has 3 territories on it rather than 2 on most planets, and it's designed to sort of focus a conflict and put more emphasis on warring. So if you want more warring, you can use this scenario, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video because it's fairly straightforward to understand once you know the basic setup of the game. This is a baggie of goods. As we fly around space, we'll find different kinds of goods, and here they are. There's life forms, metal, and somewhere in here, artifacts. I hope. There's one. An artifact. Useful abandoned space loot. This is my bag of tokens. Here I've got an action marker and an active player marker. Those will be explained later. These are the power cards. The power card deck is going to be made up with a deck of cards of relating to the planets in the game. So if Tanlock appears in our game, we'll use this deck. And if it doesn't, we won't. Here's a bag of money. We'll need that. There's a bag of dice. These are used for warring, and that's pretty much it. We'll need those. These are unknown exploration tokens. We'll definitely need those. Here we've got all the various bits and pieces. I've got here, you can see the plastic fusion beast. This is part of the deluxe. If you bought the game at retail, you will have a cardboard fusion beast that looks like this. There's also various other bits and pieces in here, including warbots, who are robotic mercenaries you can hire from the Sarkeen Regency, who sort of represent an army of robots trying to take over this galaxy that we're going to be exploring. There's also sort of various tokens in here, like this transmitter satellite and this asteroid field that you will put out as you are instructed to do so over the course of the game by certain events. But those events might not be present in the game, so you may not need these, but you may need them. You won't know until you know. There's also these two cards. These are really important. The scorecard and the first player marker. And the player order is going to rotate based on who has this active player marker. But the first player starts with the active player marker and the game ends at a point when this gets back to the first player. So making sure you note who that is very important. This scorecard is also very important, but I'll explain what that does during setup. We've got various other tokens in here, including a parasite, some fungus, an Arconian warrior, doom, and cargo tokens. But I will explain these as they become relevant, if they become relevant. I have prepared these player bags, but you will find these components loose in your game. In each player bag, I've provided one colonization card. This is really important. It's used for scoring during the game, and I'll explain how it works later. Everybody's got 3 star sloops. These represent the spaceships that your species uses to fly around space. You've also got your world ship, so total of 4 ships you can get. But really important, because without these you cannot fly from planet to planet. You should have 6 starfarers. These are your units, your basic units. They have a cost up here, 2 to make them, and 1 die and 1 power. More on that later. You should have a bag of influence columns. 1 bag of marker cubes. Command cubes, possibly. We've got here 7 money. In a 2-player game, you start with 7 coins. In a 3 or more player game, you start with 5 coins, or interstellar credits, or Starbucks, whatever you want to call them. You should have 4 city tokens, 4 academy tokens, and 4 bases as well. And these are going to go out on your player board, and these are different buildings that you can build that upgrade your hand size, your income, and your command. But we'll have a look at that in a minute when we set up our player boards. So obviously the world ship and the star sloops, at least the art changes for every faction. But the only actual differences between the factions are 4 out of the 6 possible technologies. And the Screech have that parasite thing they can do. And some have slightly different slots for buildings on their world ships. But that's pretty much it. So they're almost symmetrical, but not quite. Subtle differences. These are Sarkeen Regency tokens. Remember, we hire warbots from them. They're absurd and really, really strong, and if you defeat them you get victory points, but you probably won't get to, but they'll be populating some of this galaxy as we set up the board. We've also got here the native races that live on the planets. For example, these are the Tanlokian Mind Readers from Tanlock, and we've got 1 ally token here, so you'll get to take this if you are their allies, and once you become their allies you can hire these units to be your friends and help out your military effort. So I've bagged up all the different alien races, and I will take them as the planets come out. Some planets will have been conquered by the Sarkeen Regency, which means that they won't have any native aliens on them anymore because they've all been wiped out by evil robots. You might also find these guys as you're going through your stuff, the Ithric drones from Valka 7. This relates to that scenario mission I was talking about earlier, and you won't need them in the standard version of the game. So the very first thing we're going to do when we're setting up the game is decide which planets we're going to use. These are the inhabited planets, and these are the uninhabited planets. The uninhabited planets are obviously set on the board and will never change, but the inhabited planets will. There are 3 inhabited planets: Corzar, Corlozan, and Emrock. For some reason, you only play with 2 of these 3 planets. So you'll sort of play with all the others, bear with me. But for a start, we have to randomize and randomly remove one of these planets and put it back in the box. The other 2, we can shuffle in here, or however you want to do it, randomly place these on the board in any particular order. So now that I've got my planets out, I must pick 4 of them, 2 inhabited worlds and 2 uninhabited worlds, to belong to the Sarkeen Regency. Now the book just tells me, the rules just tell me to pick any 4, so you can determine with your players how you want to do that. Maybe you each pick an inhabited and uninhabited world, or you randomly determine it, you roll dice perhaps. However you want to do it, you'll take Sarkeen Regency tokens and put 2 of them down on inhabited planets on their undefeated side. Later on, if you're feeling impetuous, you can go and try and defeat them, but it's really difficult because they're just really powerful. For all intents and purposes, these 2 planets now count as Sarkeen Regency planets, and we won't be using any of the Sentina cards or Tanfu cards or events or races in these games. They might as well just be any other planet. So I'm using 4 Sarkeen Regency tokens, 2 inhabited and 2 uninhabited worlds, because I'm setting up a 3-player game. So in a 2-player game, I have 3 uninhabited planets and 3 inhabited planets. In a 5-player game, I have no planets at all, belonging to the Sarkeen Regency. So now that that's done, I can set up some of these unexplored tokens on the uninhabited planets. I actually really like these. Who knows what we're going to find on these uninhabited planets, these unexplored worlds? We don't know. So we might find a smuggler base, or we might find an ancient artifact, but we won't know until we get there. So we'll shuffle these and deal 1 face down to each of the uninhabited worlds on the board. And you can return the rest to the box, you won't need them. Then we'll go into the goods bag here and we'll set out some goods as well. Now these are natural resources that exist on the planet. I showed you earlier, life forms, metal, and artifacts. And you'll notice that each of our inhabited worlds have 2 zones. On an inhabited world, you've got the surface, which is where the alien race lives. For example, here we've got the Vishian Zealots from Corlozan, and this is the surface of Corlozan. It's got some flavor text here and some art of the planet's surface, and this tells you what happens if you ally with them, and this is how many points you get if you conquer them. This is the orbit, and you can tell it's orbit because there's a little planet here indicating that this is in orbit. When you're flying around space in your world ship, you can decide whether you want to go to the surface of the planet or go to the orbit of the planet and move between them. But if you go to the surface, you're probably going to have a fight with the alien race. So if you want to be their allies, maybe don't do that. I'm going to place good tokens on each of the planets that don't contain the Sarkeen Regency tokens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1 face down in orbit of an inhabited planet and face up on the surface of the inhabited planet. And I'm going to put 1 face down on an uninhabited planet. And I'm just going to go around the board doing that for each different planet. So as we move around space exploring these planets, we can pick up these goods, but only when we end our move there. But more on that later. At some point, you'll want to get out the ally tokens for all of the planets, and just put the ally tokens and the units you can hire from them nearby. Let's each pick an alien race. So I've got 3 players here. Someone's going to be the Oracles of Zune, because I already got them out. Why don't we have the Parasites of Screech as well, and we've also got the Academy of Ech. And I'll return the Legion of Decima and the Nomads of Earth to the box. So here I've got the player board for the Oracle of Zune, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take their cities here and put these onto the board. And then I'll do the same with the bases and the academies. Something important to note, that as you reveal these, you'll be unlocking resources and things you'll get later, and the final buildings are worth extra victory points. This flag symbol here is the symbol for victory points. And so as you build these buildings, you will be earning victory points that you score later, and getting to the top of these tracks is worth more victory points. These are called command points, and they allow you to move around space and take actions. During setup, you'll put a command cube here on your command track to make a note of when you spend them. So if I spend a command point, I'll move here. The next time I'll go here and here. In a 2-player game, you start with more command points than you do in a 3+ player game. So this is the board setup for 3+ players. So in a 2-player game, I'll add an extra command point by putting this down here, like that. Each player should also take one of their influence columns here and place it here on the top of the victory points track. You also get to start your adventure with your world ship, a star sloop, and a starfarer, and these are going to go on the board. But before that happens, we'll look at setting up the power deck and dealing out some power cards. I'll just get these other 2 player boards set up, and then we'll look at the power deck and the alien races. So, I got my 3 alien races set up. They're ready to deploy on the board. So let's find the relevant power cards in this power deck. So what I'm looking for here are the cards that relate to these planets. There are 2 kinds of cards in the deck. So I've put together these planet decks here with an elastic band, but there are 2 kinds of cards. These are power cards, and they come in 3 different types: action, mission, and delivery. There are no delivery ones here, actually, on Corlozan. But there is a 3rd type. So action and mission are the only ones we've got here. And then we've got event cards as well. And you'll only use 1 event card out of the possible 5 event cards per planet in any given game. So we'll take 1 of these out to use in this game for this planet, and the other 4 will go back in the box. But before I deal with the event cards, what I'm going to do is take all of the power cards for Corlozan and combine them with the power cards for all of the other inhabited planets that are not part of the Sarkeen Regency. So in this case, Measle 3, Silas, Tanlock, Korzarn, Arzos. Once I've got a nice full deck of all of those power cards for the game, I will give them a good shuffle. And then once they are good and shuffled, I will deal 3 to each player. Once that's done, I'm going to draw 1 random event per planet, and I'm going to shuffle all of these events randomly into this deck as well. All the other events belonging to the planets here can go back in the box because we're not going to need them in this game. On page 6 of the rulebook, setup step 16, there is a suggested event for each planet that it recommends you use in your first game. Or you can just ignore that and do it randomly, which is what you'll use for every setup after your first game. Once you've done that, you're instructed to cut this deck more or less in half. So try and find like the halfway point and cut it like there, I guess. Then you take the bottom half, take this scorecard we looked at earlier, put it into the deck, return the top half, and your power deck is set up. Now everybody's going to take 2 Empire cards. These Empire cards are secret objectives, secret goals that are going to come out when you score them. So there are going to be 2 opportunities to score points in the game, and I'll get into that later. But when you score points, you'll score for territories you control, things like that. You'll also score for these secret objectives. So everybody's going to be dealt 2 Empire cards at the start of the game. You can acquire more during the course of the game, but everyone will be dealt 2 at this stage of the setup. They'll pick 1 to keep and 1 to discard face up. So here we've got the Empire cards belonging to the Oracles of Zune. We've got Diplomatic, which says have at least 3 influence on 1 planet, and if you do succeed in having this when a score is counted, you'll gain 2 victory points. You've also got Imperial, control at least 3 inhabited planet surface regions, and gain 3 victory points for that as well. So that's quite a So this is quite a militaristic one. Controlling the surface of the planet means you'll have to have conquered it. So if there's one thing I know about the Zune, they're quite defensive. They're quite good at defending. So I guess they'll take Imperial because that will allow them to conquer planets and then defend them. The final step is to determine who goes first. The game instructs you all to roll a die, and the highest number goes first. But you can also use Schwazi, or, whoever was last in space gets to go first. It's really up to you how you want to decide. Maybe the person who chose the race they're going to be first goes last. Once you've determined who's going first, then in reverse order, you'll place your world ships on the board. When you place your world ships, you'll be placing them on these space nodes here, which are the little circle-y bits on the space lanes. You'll notice that the board has these pathways through space, which are space lanes that allow us to travel between the destinations of space. So we've decided Oracles of Zune are going to go first, which means that the 7th Academy of Ich gets to go and place their world ship first. So they decide to take this spot because it's a pretty good spot. The parasites of Screech are like, this looks good to us, I suppose. And finally, Oracles of Zune, for some unfathomable reason, go here at the ass end of space. So now that that's all set up, there's one more thing to do, and that's to put out some money. We're going to put 3 coins on the first 3 actions of the board. We put 3 coins out on these actions based on the number of players. So I've got 3 players, so 3 actions have coins. But if I had 5 players, they would all have coins, and if I had 2 players, only the first 2. You understand. And now with that, we're ready to start playing. So let's give the active player column to the Oracles of Zune, and we'll take this and we'll start picking our actions. Don't forget that the Oracles of Zune, because they're the first player, should have this first player card. It's important to remember who the first player is. So the game is played in a series of rounds. The active player will pick one of these 5 actions on the board by putting their action column down on it. They will then take that action, and then every other player has the option to follow them by taking that action also, or by refreshing or taking another action. If they take a different action, they have to pay command points, so it limits their resources. So it's an inefficient way to spend command points, but it might allow you to do something really important. You can also refresh, which is a free thing, which gets you all your command points and gets you your income and gets you cards as well, power cards as well, which is really important. Power cards are these cards in your hand. They're going to be used for combat. They're going to be used for doing missions. They're going to be used for playing actions. These cards have many, many functions, which makes it very difficult to decide how you're going to use them. You always draw more cards when you refresh from this deck here that we set up earlier. And when this deck is exhausted, the game will end. You may have noticed earlier that we hid a scorecard in here. When the scorecard comes out, everyone will be forced to play their colonization card. You can play it before the scorecard comes out if you like. You can play your colonization card at any point at the end of your turn in order to score. When you score all of the points that are available to you. You will score these points again at the end of the game, which means there's 2 scoring rounds. One when you play your colonization card, and another at the end of the game. If you have not yet played your colonization card, when the scorecard is revealed from the power card deck, you must play it at the end of your next turn. So remember, the game is divided into rounds. The active player picks an action and takes a turn based on the action they picked. Then everybody else has a turn to take an action as well, either following the leader or doing something else. At the end of that turn, they would have to play their colonization card if the scorecard had appeared. So, what do we score? There are 4 ways to score points. You can score points by controlling planets, by having allies, by the buildings and technologies that you've built and researched on your player board, and by completing the Empire cards that we dealt at the start of the game. What does it mean by controlling planets? Well, when you go to war with an inhabited planet, if you beat the native faction, you can put one of your control cubes down. For example, if our 7th Academy of Ig invades Corlazan for some reason and goes to war with them, This control symbol here actually has an explosion in it to indicate that a battle will have to take place. If the 7th Academy win, they'll put a control cube down. They now control the surface of this planet, and if scoring occurs while the cube is here, they'll gain 2 victory points. If they were the allies of Corlozan, they would gain the alliance token for the Vishirian Zealots, and that would be worth 2 victory points when scoring takes place. You can also get your command tokens here on uninhabited planets. When you do that, you'll also score them. During the scoring, you'll get 1 victory point, as you can see here, unless there's something that changes that. The ancient temple might be present on one of the uninhabited worlds, which would give you an extra victory point if you controlled the world when you scored. So we'll talk a bit about how you make allies later, but you make allies by getting influence on their planet. If you get influence on their planet, you take their ally token, and if you possess their ally token when scoring takes place, then you'll get those points as well. So in this case, 2 for having the Corlozan as allies. So if we have a look here at the player board of the 7th Academy of Eeg, you'll notice that all of the technologies have a little flag next to them. That's just to remind you that you get 1 victory point for each technology completed on your player board when scoring takes place. Furthermore, whenever you remove a building, you'll reveal at least 1 flag, so 1 victory point per flag revealed as well. When scoring takes place, buildings 3 and 4 are worth 2 each on each track. And the final way to score points would be with this Empire card. For example, this one says gene splicing, own at least 3 life form goods. And that can be goods that you've spent on upgrades or goods that you've spent on anything. That doesn't have to be life form goods that are unused in your pool. But suffice to say, if you could reveal this and prove that you've completed it, you would get 2 bonus victory points. Furthermore, you can keep it and score it again at the end of the game if it's still applicable. The only ways to score points during the course of the game are to complete delivery missions or by winning a battle. Every time you win a battle, you score a victory point. Whenever you score victory points, you track them here on the tracker. So now that we know how to do all of that, let's look at how we get there. There are 5 actions in the game: move and attack, research and build, card action and diplomacy, recruit, and scavenge. The active player will choose one of these actions on their turn. They will then carry it out, and then all other players can do the same or take a refresh or take another action, any action, by spending command points. There are 3 resources you're trying to manage. Your space credits, Starbucks, the space money. You've got your command points, which sort of represent, in addition to using command points to move your ship, you also use them to take any action. So command points allow you to take different actions and things like that, which is really important. Finally, the last resource that you're trying to manage, power cards. They are used for winning battles, they're used for taking actions, special diplomatic actions. They're used for completing missions, and they're used for delivery quests as well. So they've got lots of applicability and they're really, really useful, and so you want to make sure that you have a lot of them and you're not running out. Unfortunately, like most 4X games, you won't have enough resources and actions to do everything that you want all the time. When someone takes one of the actions with money on it for the first time, they get to take that money. And our Oracles of Zune here have taken move and attack, which allows them to move and then attack. If you want to stay put and attack, you can, but you still have to pay a price for it. But let's have a look. They're starting over here on their space node. As you can see here, space is made up of these pale space lanes connecting planets in different areas. It should be noted that although the inhabited planets have an orbit and a surface, they can be entered, both sides can be entered and exited by all space lanes. Presumably the orbit is around the whole planet, which is 3-dimensional and not 2-dimensional as depicted here. When you move along space lanes or around these things, you must stop on space nodes and planets and any other sort of particular events such as wormholes and the trade ship. So here we've got the Oracles of Zune moving 2 spaces to this uninhabited planet where they will stop. On the board we've got space mines, space evil denizen creature, asteroid belt with these die depictions here. These do not have to be stopped, so you can move straight through there as one move, but you must roll and equal or exceed this value. If you fail, then you don't go anywhere, but you can spend another command point to try the move again, if you like. Or else you just stay put. These are the command points here, and as you move, you tick them down, spending them. When you run out, you can no longer move and go anywhere. You also can't do anything else that requires you to spend command points. You'll recognize them by the symbol here on various cards and in costs for different things. You can move through one another without penalty. You can move through the Sarkeen Regency without penalty. You can pretty much move through anything that's not a space hazard without penalty. You don't have to fight anything you don't want to, with the exception of going to the surface of a planet. You can't stop off and pick up goods on the surface of a planet without fighting them. If you end your movement on an empty planet, you get the tokens there. Oh, look, a wormhole. All of the wormholes on the board are connected and can just be moved between instantaneously. Imagine that everything with a wormhole symbol is adjacent, so that's pretty cool. You'll collect the good that was on the planet, so that's great. You can use that for building and stuff later. I'll explain that later when we get to building and research, but you get to put down a command cube, which is really important. And that planet now belongs to you. You can build a building on it later. You leave it undefended, and someone comes along and they want it, they can just take it. Inhabited worlds work differently, but uninhabited worlds can just be taken over by anyone who wants it because you didn't leave anyone to defend it. When you're moving, you pick the number of units in a region. A region is a self-contained space. So in this case, an uninhabited planet, or the orbit or surface area of an inhabited planet. You pick the number of units you want to move in that region, and then you form a group and move that group as far as you want. You cannot drop people off as you move, but you can pick them up. Note that the Starfarer, for example, is a ground unit and can't move through space on his own. He needs access to either a star sloop or the world ship. There's no maximum group size, but the maximum size for combat is 3. So any more than that is just, superfluous. It's not actually superfluous. You probably want loads of dudes to defend things and stuff like that, or otherwise people will fly around space taking your things. So that's movement. Now let's look at combat. Let's imagine our Oracles of Zune here have ended their movement on Corlozan. They've decided to go to the surface of Corlozan, where they will automatically engage in a fight with the Versian Zealots who live on Corlozan. And we know this because there is a explosion here in the control box where we'll get to put down our control cube if we're successful. Ooh, so close. So, in order to engage a fight, first we look at the units present in the fight. In this case, our Oracles of Zune only have 2 units here. And what we're looking for are these 2 sort of stats at the bottom, the die symbol and the explosion symbol that looks like this. And that represents power. The world ship itself does not have any combat power at all, unless you build bases on it, which are buildings that you can build. Remember, you can build buildings on your world ship. But we'll look at that later. If you haven't built any bases on it, then it doesn't do anything in combat. So, in order to defend their planet, one Versian Zealot will show up. Yeah, not very strong defenses, but they'll show up. And then what we're going to do is basically check to see who has bigger numbers. So in this case, we will total up first the power. In this case, our Oracles of Zune have 1 power, 0 on the Sloop, 1 on the Starfarer, against the 2 on the Versian Zealot. Then we'll total up the total number of die, 2 on the Sloop, 1 on the Starfarer for 3, and 1 on the Zealot. So we'll roll that many dice. This happens simultaneously, but 3 for our Oracles of Zune. And they'll take the highest number, which they'll keep and add to their power. The rest of the dice will be discarded. And our Versian Zealot will do the same. He's got a 2. So now the total power is 5 against 4. Then what happens is we can apply a power card from our hand. So this is the Oracles of Zune hand of cards here. We've got 3 action cards which we can play later on as actions. If there's something on the card that we want to do, we'll play them as an action. They have a cost and text here. But right now we're in combat, so we're not going to think about that. Instead, we're looking at this number here. And you can tell it's related to combat because it's got a power symbol under it. And this will add, playing the card will add this to your total power. So we're on 5 against their 4. Now, they are an AI-controlled player. Their die will be rolled by the player to your left. Because they're controlled by the AI, they don't have a hand of power cards. So we'll just draw the top card from the power deck and assign it to them. We know that this is at least 1 because the range is 1 to 4. So that means that we're currently drawing and the defender wins ties, which means I know I need to play at least a 1 if I want to win. But I do want to win, so I'll play this 2 and hope they don't have a 3 or 4 down there. Then the Oracle of Zune and the Versians reveal their cards simultaneously. Oh no. So we've got a total of 8 here against a total of 7 here, which means the Versian Zealot wins. The loser gets to keep their power card. So this will return to the Oracle of Zune's hand. And the winner's card is discarded. Then the Oracles of Zune are actually kicked back to their nearest controlled planet. In this case, they've still got this uninhabited planet here. So they're kicked back there. But their units aren't killed or anything like that. The only real thing is that they've wasted time. So that's how combat works. It's always the same. You can choose, if you've got more units available to you than 3, you can choose which ones you want to include. Some units and abilities allow you to include more than 3 tokens, but typically it's 3 tokens per side in a fight. Whenever you fight an alien race that's on the board, like we just did with the Versian Zealots, then you will just take one of their units and fight that unit, and if you win, you take control of the planet, and if you lose, you get kicked back to your nearest controlled space. If you don't have a controlled space nearby, you'll get kicked back to the nearest space node. In the event that, for example, you're a bunch of starfarers on a planet and you're defeated and you don't have a spaceship, then you're kicked back still to the nearest controlled planet. If there isn't a controlled planet adjacent to the one you're fighting on, you're kicked back to the world ship. If you're fighting another player, the combat's essentially the exact same, except of course that instead of drawing a card from the top of the deck, they'll be playing a card from their hand as well. Should be noted that during combat, nothing is really destroyed. The Versian Zealot unit I put out will return to the pile there and will not remain on the board, but that's because he only appears when you're taking on the surface of that planet. But by and large, units will never be removed as a result of combat, except in that instance there. You can also go and fight the Sarkeen Regency. They have a power of 9 and 6 dice. They're brutally difficult, but if you defeat them, you gain 2 victory points. That's pretty cool. In addition to the victory point you get for winning a fight anyway. Did I mention that? Every time you win a fight, you gain 1 victory point. And that's immediate, so you just clock it straight onto the victory point tracker here. If you're on a planet and you want to war with someone else on that planet, and you've taken the move and attack option, you still have to actually kind of move. So you just sort of stall there, but it still costs you a command point. So then everybody has a chance to move and attack, or, any other action they want by spending command points. And then when everybody's done that, we'll go back to the Oracles of Zune here, and they'll pass the active player marker to the Parasites of Screech, who now get to choose an action, and they're going to take Research and Build. Research and Build is focused on your player board, and it allows you to research those technologies and build those buildings. So let's have a look at how that works. We're back here with our friends, the Oracles of Zune. Now, you might remember earlier that I mentioned 3 resources: money, which are space credits, power cards, and command points. These 3 things can be upgraded by building these buildings on your board. You build cities and your income goes up. Every time you take a refresh action, you'll gain that income here on your board. So you start with an income of 5, but if you build 3 cities, your income will be 9. Similarly, when you take a refresh action, you'll drop to your hand size, which is 3 at the start of the game. However, for every base you build, your hand size could potentially increase. The first base gets you +1 card. On third base gets you plus another card for a hand size of 5. There are also ways to increase your hand size by finding buildings and doing research and things like that. Finally, we've got command points here. And as you build academies, your command points will go up as well, giving you more command points to spend, making you more flexible in the actions you can take, allowing you to complete more action cards, and also allowing your world ship to move further. In order to build these buildings, we must pay the price. The price is listed here in red. So you can see that in order to build the first academy, we total up these values 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in order to build the first academy. However, there's these strange boxes here. These can be filled with goods that we find floating around space. For every good we put down, we cover up a part of the fee, reducing the overall cost. Now the first academy is going to cost me 5 instead of 7. After I build it, it will cost me 7. The next one will cost me 7 instead of 9. I can continue to put down goods on this track to cover up these fees. And for every good I put down here, all future buildings of this type that I build will be cheaper. However, I can only put down the same goods in this track. So I can only put down the goods as I build the buildings, and I must remain consistent. I can't mix and match goods. But during the research and build action, I can put down as many goods as I like on these tracks. If I pay the price to build the academy, I take the building and I can put it either onto my world ship, I can put it down here, in which case it will be free, or I can put it in one of these other two slots, in which case I must pay a power cost. If I put it down here, I'll pay a power cost of 3. If I put it down here, I'll pay a power cost of 2. I'll explain how to pay power costs in a minute. The other thing I can do is put it down on a planet. I can put it down on a planet I control, either the surface of an inhabited planet or on an uninhabited planet. I can only build one building per planet. This includes inhabited planets. So once a building is down, I cannot build another building there. Note that this planet can change allegiance later. If I lose control of it, someone else takes control of it. It doesn't actually matter. The building will not return to my player board. Once it's placed, it's good there, and I will continue to gain the benefits of having built it for the rest of the game. The one exception is these bases. The bases have a power and a die on them and contribute these to combat. So if you're in a combat zone with a base that is on the surface of a planet you control, then you'll gain 1 additional power and 1 additional die during the combat that we looked at earlier. It is possible to take control of a planet with an enemy base on it, in which case it then counts as your base. If we build a base onto our world ship, then our world ship has an effect in combat as well. Note that it doesn't count as being a token involved in the fight, so you can have your world ship plus other tokens involved in the fight. Bases don't actually count as tokens involved in the fight at all. They just contribute bonuses to the fight. We've got 6 researches here. These 4 here are different for each alien race that you might play, and these 2 are the same. You've got a cost at the bottom, and then you've got an effect at the top. In order to pay the cost, you must pay the power. Here it's 4 for warp technology, and there's also a picture of an artifact. So in order to build this, I cover the warp with the depicted good, and I pay the power price. And then it says pay 1 empire card to warp world ship. Well, there's a lot of technologies and stuff, lots of events and action cards in this game. They're all detailed in the glossary of the rulebook, so I'll let you discover what warping a world ship means yourself. Suffice to say that I've now researched this technology. I can warp my world ship by paying empire cards, but I need to pay that power cost. Imagine I'd also built an academy, a base here on my world ship here. The total cost I now have to pay is actually 6 power. The power cost for things that have been built during the research and build step is always played at the end of the phase. And the way it's paid is by going into your hand of cards, finding a cards equal to the number of power that's been spent. In this case, I've spent 6, so I must discard cards with a total power value of 6. Note that this could leave me with 1 card, but I cannot overspend unless it's necessary. So in this case, I can't spend this 1, even if I might want to. So at the end of my turn, I pay the power price, and I've researched this technology here, and also I've paid for an academy, which cost me 3. And so that's build and research. Pretty straightforward. And then the 7th Academy of Ig have a turn, and they decide for card action and diplomacy. And they get the money associated with that. So what is card action and diplomacy? Well, this allows you to play those cards from your hand. So this is the hand belonging to the Oracle of Zune. And we see here that they've got all these different cards that say action on them here in their hand. And these are also associated with different planets. And if we have a look on each card, we'll see a little bit of flavor text. For example, this is an Arzos action card. It says, I help to evacuate an underground city. Cost 2 command. So if I'm going to, during the card action or diplomacy step, I can either play an action card from my hand or do diplomacy. If I have an action card, it's almost always better. Diplomacy is kind of a last resort if you can't do anything else more efficient. If I want to play this card, I'm going to have to pay this cost. If I don't have the cost, I can't play the card. If I do, I then get the benefit. This says, roll a die. If 3 plus, place 2 influence on Arzos. Or if a 1 or a 2, you may pay 1 credit to place only 1 influence on Arzos. So I will pay 2 command. I will roll a die. It's a 5, so I get 2 influence on Arzos. Now, I talked about influence a little bit earlier, but this seems like as good a time as any to talk about influence. Influence goes down here. It's represented by these influence columns. If you have the most influence on a planet, you get to take their ally banner. This has a special ability on it. For example, the Arzos ally banner says, place goods on any track. This means that when you're placing goods to make your buildings cheaper on your player board, you can actually use any goods. They don't have to be consistent like I said they had to. It also allows you to hire these Arzos mercenaries during a recruit action. So we'll look at that a bit later. But this will remain with you until someone else beats you for influence. Note that if they equal your influence, you retain it, and it's not until they exceed your influence on Arzos that you lose it. It should also be noted that if you show up later with your world ship and conquer them and take control of their planet, like this, then any influence you have on that planet is lost. Of course, once you've conquered it, you can then gain influence back again, but any influence you'd gained before you went to war with them is lost. I guess they just don't like being conquered. So, action cards are a great way to gain influence. You can also do delivery missions, which are a great way to gain influence as well. But if you don't have any action cards in your hand, or you don't have any action cards you can afford on your hand, you can take the diplomacy action. This is the only way to discard power cards from your hand legitimately. Like if you've got power cards you don't want, the only way to get rid of them without playing them for their effect, or using them in battle, for example, is to take a diplomacy action. When you take a diplomacy action, you just discard a number of power cards from your hand. You then total the power on those cards. You must attempt to roll equal to or lower than this. So if I discard all these cards, I can't actually fail. But if I'd rolled higher than the number I discarded, then I would be unsuccessful and nothing would happen. I would still discard these cards though. But if I am successful, I discard all the cards, and then I can take 1 influence and place it in the influence on any planet I want. And if that makes me their allies, then I take their ally ability and I can hire their troops during a recruit action. Speaking of which, maybe we should move on to the recruit action. When the active player takes a recruit action, they can actually draw 2 empire cards, choose 1 to keep, and discard the other. And then they can recruit. And they can recruit Starfarers. They can recruit Warbots if you have the Warbots technology. These are the Warbots here. Or you can recruit units belonging to anyone that you're allied with. And you'll note that units all have a cost at the top. This is based on their effectiveness. For example, Warbots cost 3, and the Arzos mercenaries cost 7. They're very expensive. They're also very powerful. They have 2 die and 3 power, as opposed to the Warbot who has 1 die and 2 power. And you can recruit as many units as you can afford. So long as you have space credits to keep buying them, you can keep buying them. You also have to recruit your own starfarers. You can always buy your own starfarers if you want, but they're not very good. You can also buy more star sloops if you want to race around the galaxy doing things. Star Sloops 3 as well, but it's not very good in combat. But it does have the ability to move around space, which is really important. When you're done buying all the units you want, you can deploy them on the board. You can either put them into regions that contain your world ship, or into regions where you have at least one building. Note that if you control a region, but you don't have a building there, you can't put troops there. So the last action we're going to look at is Scavenge. And Scavenge is essentially a way for the active player to take a refresh action. You see, these two actions here, refresh and any action, can only be taken by players who aren't the active player. If the active player wants to refresh because they haven't got resources to do anything else, they don't want to do anything else, note that they can take a move and attack and just not do it, but it's not very wise because they're essentially giving free actions to their fellows. But if you take the Scavenge action, this allows you to refresh as the active player, but it does mean that the other players at the table, on their turn, can take any action they want at half price. So they can do any action they want for 1 command point instead of 2. So I did mention missions and delivery cards. Let's have a quick look at those power cards. Mission cards are a great way to score points and gain influence. Again, you'll see the keyword mission here. You'll get some fun flavor text like, I helped some cyborgs raid a Sentinian science facility. And then it says trigger. So this mission card can be played from your hand at any time you accomplish this trigger. So this says trigger, attack the Sentina surface region. So Sentina is just here. And so if you come to this planet and attack the surface, it doesn't actually matter whether you win or lose because it just says attack. So after you've resolved the conflict, whether or not you've won or lost, you can play this mission card from your hand to gain 1 influence on Corzar and 1 victory point. If you won the mission, if you won the battle, you would also gain a victory point, so that'd be 2. But if you didn't, well, at least you got this consolidation prize. Here's a delivery card. A delivery is a little different. It says pick up and then it has a reward at the bottom. So again, we've got the delivery keyword here. We've got some flavor text. I transport a group of cyborg infiltrators to Sentina. Why do the Corzars hate the Sentinians? We don't know, but it seems to be consistent. It says end movement on Corzar and pick up a cargo token. Destination, Sentina. So our world ship or a star sloop could stop here on Corzar. And now that we're there, we can play this delivery card from our hand, in which case we'll get one of these cargo tokens and we'll put it here on our ship to indicate that we've got that cargo. Now, it should be noted that we can only have 1 delivery mission at a time. If we play another delivery card from our hand, because we're on a planet, we would have to abandon the delivery mission we're currently on because the game has no way of tracking multiple cargoes, and just don't worry about it. 1 delivery mission at a time. When you arrive at the drop-off point with your goods, you can immediately drop them off. You can do this before anything else happens. If you land on the surface and you're about to go to war with them, you can deliver the goods first and then go to war. It's crazy. But, you're like, hey, here are your goods. Also, die. Once you've dropped off the goods, you'll gain the bonus here on the delivery card. So in this case, place 2 influence on Corzar, gain 3 victory points, and lose all your influence on Sentina. I guess because we delivered cyborg infiltrators. And that's not a cargo that the Sentinians particularly wanted. It should be noted that if you're flying around space with your 1 delivery mission and your cargo, an enemy player's world ship could show up and attack you, and if they win the conflict, they can steal your cargo and your delivery mission. And it's theirs now to complete, and you've lost it, and you're a sad panda. You're going to be drawing these power cards. Eventually you might come across an event card. An event card looks like this, and it's different to a regular power card. When you draw an event card for any reason, set it aside on the world to which it belongs, in this case Arzal, and we'll just put it under any influence that exists on Arzal's, and then we'll wait and finish resolving whatever we were doing when we drew it. So if it was part of a battle that we were resolving with an AI, then we would draw a new card for that AI. If we were drawing it as part of a refresh action to refresh our hand, then we would draw a card to replace it. And then after that is resolved, we come back and we have a look at what it does. So this says Merchant Guild forms. Powerful mining companies have banded together to form an alliance. Purchase a random good for 2 credits. Pay an additional 3 credits to add 1 influence to Arzos. There are event cards for every single inhabited planet that's not controlled by the Sarkeen Regency in the power deck. And so these will come up over the course of the game at random intervals because we shuffled the deck randomly. And they'll just go down here onto the planet they belong to, and they'll have an ongoing in-game effect of some kind. Once the entire power deck is exhausted, you will shuffle the discard pile and reset the deck. But this triggers the game end. You will then continue to play until the first player is the active player again. Once the active player token passes back to the first player after the power deck has been reset, the game is officially over. Then you'll do scoring again, just like you did when the score card came up or when someone played their colonization card. You'll score planet surfaces, allies, you'll score completed empire cards, and you'll score buildings and technologies. Remember that you can score your empire cards again, even the ones you scored the first time around, provided you still meet the criteria for completing them. If you don't meet the criteria for completing them anymore, then you can't score them. Once all that's scored, the game is over, and whoever has the most victory points is the winner. If you're tied for victory points, then whoever has the most units on the board is the winner. If you're tied for units, then whoever has the most influence on the board is the winner. If you're tied for influence, then whoever has the most coins is the winner. If you're tied for coins, then I guess just celebrate your shared victory or play again to determine a winner. So another little tip is just remember that you've got your colonization card. You want to play that when you're on top. The allegiance of planets, battles on planets, or the allegiance of your allies can change very quickly just in one turn. So if you think you're ahead and you could score a lot of points by playing your colonization card, that's when to do it. Don't wait for the scorecard to come up and force your hand, because when that comes up, everybody's going to be looking to gain as many victory points as possible, because they're also going to be forced to play their colonization card. And that's it. That's all you really need to know to play Empires of the Void 2. So I hope that that's helped get you into this game. It's not actually as complicated as it seems. There are a lot of things that might warrant clarification. For example, the event cards as they come out might warrant a bit of more information, or these technologies. For example, what does Warp a World ship mean? Well, all of that is explained in the glossary at the back of the rulebook. It's very clear and easy to find in there. So I hope that you'll have fun discovering all the different things that Empires of the Void has to offer you. And I hope you won't resent me for not going through the entire glossary and explaining everything, but it is quite a hefty manual. However, what we can do is take you on an adventure into space with us. I'll be back tomorrow with Michael and Ollie, and we'll all be taking on the role of alien races, exploring our own version of the Empires of the Void galaxy. And we'll be trying to outmaneuver one another and gain the most victory points. And of course, there's probably going to be conflict and warring. Intergalactic tension, conflict, and warring. So I hope you'll come back and join us for that. And I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching, everyone.